I've always been careful about what people think of me. Even now, I catch myself adjusting how I sit, how I speak, the subtle movements of my hands. But if I'm being honest, that caution wasn't always about being shy or socially anxious. There was something deeper, something I didn't understand about myself until much later. It started when I was in high school. I remember the first time I tried on a piece of clothing that wasn't mine. It was a sweater, a soft, pastel pink, and I found it lying in my sister's closet. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was curious, I suppose. I slipped it on, and in that instant, everything felt different. Comfortable, almost like it was meant to be on me, even though I had never seen myself in anything like it before. My reflection in the mirror wasn't shocking. It wasn't embarrassing. It was just me. I quickly took it off when I heard my mom calling from the kitchen. My heart raced, not because I felt guilty, but because I had discovered something about myself I didn't have the words for. From that day, I found myself sneaking little things from my sister's wardrobe, scarves, hair clips, soft socks, and each time I felt a strange thrill, a sense of being closer to something I didn't fully understand. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. The thought of someone knowing made my stomach twist. For years, I carried this secret alone. I buried it beneath layers of normalcy. Friends, sports, schoolwork, pretending that my fascination with softness, with colors and fabrics and shapes, was just a phase or a silly curiosity. But the truth was relentless. Every time I saw an outfit I liked, I felt a tug deep inside me, a quiet voice whispering that this was part of who I was, even if I didn't yet have the courage to admit it to anyone. I want to pause here and be honest. There was shame, yes, but there was also joy. A joy that I couldn't explain, a secret happiness that felt like sunlight spilling into a dark room. That mix of fear and excitement became the rhythm of my life. And then one evening, everything changed. It wasn't a dramatic moment, no lightning bolt or a life-shattering event. It was just a quiet night, me alone in my room, scrolling through social media, when I stumbled across a post about cross-dressing, about femboys. And suddenly, I wasn't alone. There were people out there who felt the same way I did, who dressed in ways society didn't expect, and who celebrated it instead of hiding it. That night, something inside me shifted. For the first time, I realized that what I had been feeling all those years wasn't wrong. It wasn't a quirk to hide. It was part of my identity. And that realization, simple as it seems, scared me more than anything else. Because accepting it meant confronting the world and my own fears. It meant making choices that could change how people saw me forever. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every day, I found myself imagining what it would feel like to dress freely, to experiment with my appearance without hiding, to explore the part of me that had been locked away for so long. The thought was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. That night, I made a promise to myself. A small, quiet promise that no one could hear. I would explore this side of me, even if it meant stepping into a world I didn't fully understand yet. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. And so, my journey began, not with a big announcement or a dramatic reveal, but with a single choice: to try, to explore, and to be honest with myself. The next few weeks were a blur of experimentation, excitement, and nerves. I started small, taking tiny steps in the privacy of my room. I would try on my sister's clothes when I knew I had the house to myself, sometimes pairing a soft blouse with jeans, other times just a simple scarf wrapped around my neck. Every reflection in the mirror became an exploration of identity. I studied how clothes changed my posture, how certain fabrics felt against my skin, how my hair framed my face differently depending on what I wore. At first, I was terrified. What if someone caught me? What if this was just a phase, some fleeting curiosity I would later regret? But the fear was always accompanied by a deeper, more compelling emotion: joy. A quiet, unshakable happiness that I couldn't find anywhere else. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was subtle, like the first sip of water after being parched. It was mine. One afternoon, while hiding in my room, I came across a video of someone explaining their journey into being a femboy. They talked about feeling trapped in expectations, about discovering a side of themselves that society told them to suppress. I listened, captivated. Every word felt like it was written for me. Their story mirrored mine, but it was also a roadmap, a hint that I could navigate these feelings without fear of losing myself. I realized then that this wasn't just about clothes or appearances. It was about freedom. Freedom to exist in a way that felt authentic. But as much as I wanted to embrace this part of myself, I couldn't shake the fear of discovery. The idea of someone walking in and seeing me in a skirt, a delicate top, maybe even mascara and nail polish, made my stomach churn. I imagined my friends laughing, my parents being confused, the whispers of strangers. The fear almost paralyzed me, and for days I debated whether I should even continue. Then one evening, something happened that changed everything. My sister, completely unaware of my secret explorations, came into my room, holding a box of her old clothes she was about to donate. She smiled and said, "I think these could use a new home. Maybe someone else would appreciate them." And just like that, without knowing it, she offered me permission. Permission not through words directed at me, but through an act that said, "It's okay to enjoy these things." That small gesture hit me harder than I expected. I realized that support didn't always come from explicit statements. Sometimes it came from understanding, from gestures that said, "You're allowed to exist as you are." That night, I stayed up later than usual, trying on pieces I had been afraid to touch. I practiced walking in them, adjusting how I sat, moving my arms differently. I studied my face in the mirror, noticing the subtle changes in how I felt about myself. For the first time, I felt a spark of confidence. Not the flashy, over-the-top confidence of someone performing for an audience, but the quiet, steady kind that comes from truly being yourself. It was fragile, but real, and it lit a fire inside me that I couldn't ignore. That spark became my motivation. Every day after that, I sought ways to explore further, new styles, small accessories, experimenting with makeup. Each step was like learning a language I had always known in my heart, but never spoken aloud. And each step made me more aware of the duality I carried, the part of me the world expected to see, and the part of me that was finally beginning to speak. The weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, my exploration grew bolder. I started paying attention to details, how a particular shade of pink could change the warmth of my complexion, how soft fabrics could feel almost like a second skin. I experimented with hairstyles, trying to soften my features, and learned that something as simple as a well-placed hair clip or the way I parted my hair could make a huge difference in how I felt looking in the mirror. But it wasn't just about appearances. The transformation was happening inside me as well. I started noticing my own movements, the way I spoke, the rhythm of my hands when I gestured. Dressing differently forced me to confront my own identity in ways I hadn't before. I began asking questions I'd buried for years. Who am I when no one is watching? Who do I want to be, not who society tells me I should be? There were nights when I couldn't sleep, lying in bed and imagining the life I wanted, one where I could walk down the street without fear, wearing whatever made me feel most like myself. And yet, fear was never far behind. What would my friends say? Would my family ever understand? Even thinking about strangers' judgments twisted my stomach. Some nights, I cried quietly, torn between the desire to be free and the fear of being rejected. Then came the turning point. It wasn't dramatic, no grand revelation, just a small but profound moment of courage. I had gathered the nerve to go outside in an outfit I had spent hours perfecting, a soft sweater, slightly oversized to feel comfortable, paired with slim-fit pants and a pair of shoes that made me feel grounded. I walked down the street near my house, heart racing, palms sweaty, fully expecting someone to stare or laugh. But no one did. And in that silence, in that ordinary moment, I felt something incredible. Relief. Peace. It was as if the world had been holding its breath with me, and now it exhaled. I realized then that the fear had been far worse than reality. It wasn't about people noticing me, it was about noticing myself and deciding I was allowed to exist as I truly was. After that, small acts of bravery became part of my routine. I started posting anonymously online, sharing pictures and stories with communities of people who understood exactly what I was feeling. They welcomed me without judgment, and the support was overwhelming. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere, not just in the digital world, but inside my own skin. Yet, even with this growing confidence, I faced setbacks. There were mornings when I woke up, looked in the mirror, and felt a wave of self-doubt. Did I look silly? Was I overstepping some invisible boundary? Those moments were harsh, and they reminded me that this journey wasn't a straight line. Transformation, I realized, isn't just about clothes or appearance. It's about reconciling every piece of yourself, including the parts that scream, "Stay hidden." And so I kept going. Because the alternative, living a life hiding who I was, felt unbearable. Every day, every outfit, every step outside my comfort zone was a declaration. I am here, I exist, and I deserve to feel at home in my own skin. As I continued exploring, I began noticing subtle shifts in how I interacted with the world. Simple things, how people responded to me, how I carried myself, started to change. I realized that when I dressed in ways that felt authentic, I wasn't just changing my appearance, I was changing my energy. There was a lightness to my movements, a fluidity in my gestures that I hadn't experienced before. It was as if I had been holding back for years, and now I was finally letting myself move freely. But the world outside my room wasn't always kind. There were awkward moments, times when I misread a glance or felt someone judging me from across the street. Those moments stung, and sometimes I would retreat, questioning whether this journey was worth it. I'd go back to the mirror, take off the outfit, and feel a mix of disappointment and frustration. I knew the fear wasn't just in them, it was in me too, the voice that said maybe I was being foolish, maybe I didn't belong. One particular incident stuck with me. I had decided to attend a local event, something casual with friends, wearing a carefully chosen outfit I had spent weeks planning. My heart raced as we arrived, and every step toward the venue felt heavier than the last. I caught people staring, not maliciously but curiously, and for a split second, panic surged. But then I remembered why I was there. I reminded myself of the months I had spent discovering who I was, of the joy I felt in being true to myself, and I straightened my shoulders. That evening was transformative. I laughed freely, engaged in conversations, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was performing or hiding. The outfit wasn't just fabric and color, it was a symbol of courage, of the choice I had made to embrace my identity. And in that moment, I realized something important. The real challenge wasn't what other people thought. It was accepting that I was worthy of existing fully and authentically. After that, my experiments with style and identity grew more confident. I tried more daring combinations, softer fabrics, accessories that emphasized who I felt I was inside. Each choice was a puzzle piece, assembling the version of myself I had long imagined but never dared to show. I began keeping a journal, documenting not just outfits, but feelings, fears, victories, and even setbacks. Reading those entries later, I realized how far I had come and how much courage it had taken just to exist openly in my own space. But transformation isn't linear. There were days when doubt would creep back in, especially when I compared myself to others online, seeing people who seemed naturally confident, effortlessly expressive, and perfectly in sync with their identity. Those moments could be crushing, making me question whether I would ever fully fit into this world of self-expression. But then I'd remember my mirror, my first experiments, and the warmth that came with those small victories. And I'd push forward, even if it was just a tiny step at a time. One night, lying in bed, I thought about the irony of it all. For years, I had feared being seen, and yet, my greatest fear had been hiding. The realization hit me like a wave. I had spent so long trying to fit expectations that weren't mine, denying a side of myself that had always existed. And now, finally, I was reclaiming it piece by piece, stitch by stitch, choice by choice. Around this time, I began to notice the power of small, deliberate choices. It wasn't about making a spectacle or shocking anyone. It was about claiming my presence in a world that had always asked me to hide. I started experimenting with colors that reflected my mood, textures that felt like an extension of my skin, and accessories that were subtle yet expressive. Each morning became a ritual, not just of dressing, but of affirming who I was and who I wanted to become. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a group dedicated to femboy fashion and self-expression. People were sharing their journeys, their fears, their triumphs, their moments of uncertainty. For the first time, I felt a deep sense of connection. Their experiences mirrored mine in ways that were almost uncanny, yet each story was unique, a personal reflection of courage and vulnerability. I realized that my journey wasn't solitary. There were others like me, navigating the same emotional landscape, learning to balance fear and authenticity. That realization sparked something inside me. I started sharing my own experiments online, initially anonymously, posting photos of outfits and short reflections about my feelings and growth. The responses were encouraging, supportive comments, messages from people who understood, even subtle tips and suggestions from those more experienced. Slowly, my anonymous presence evolved into a small but meaningful community. It was humbling, and it gave me a sense of accountability. I wasn't just exploring for myself anymore. I was contributing to a network of people learning to embrace themselves. Still, the personal challenges remained. Some days, I would walk into a store or a public space wearing an outfit that felt right, only to be overwhelmed by the fear of being judged. The thought of someone whispering or laughing made me tense up, my heart racing with anxiety. I learned to breathe through those moments, to remind myself that the mirror in my room had already shown me the truth. My worth wasn't defined by others' reactions. And then came an unexpected twist. My friends began noticing subtle changes in me. Some mentioned that I seemed more confident, more at ease in my own skin, though they didn't know why. Others teased me gently about my new sense of style, but it was never cruel. I realized that authenticity can ripple outward quietly, changing not only how you feel about yourself, but how the world perceives you. The more I embraced my identity, the more natural interactions became, the more I felt anchored in my own sense of self. One evening, I had a breakthrough moment. I was getting ready for a small gathering, experimenting with an outfit I had carefully chosen, combining textures and colors I had once feared to wear. As I looked in the mirror, I felt a surge of emotion, pride, joy, and relief all at once. I realized I was no longer trying to hide or fit into someone else's mold. I was present, fully visible to myself, and for the first time, that visibility felt safe. I could finally acknowledge that this journey wasn't just about clothing or appearance. It was about claiming my life and my identity with intention and courage. That night, I went to the gathering with a quiet confidence I hadn't felt before. People noticed, yes, but not in a way that mattered. They were reacting to me, but I wasn't reacting to them. For the first time, I experienced the liberation of existing without apology. And in that freedom, I realized that transformation wasn't a destination. It was a continual process of acceptance, exploration, and bravery. As the months passed, I began to notice a deeper change beyond the outfits, the accessories, and the colors. The transformation was no longer just external. It was woven into my sense of self. I moved differently, spoke differently, and most importantly, thought differently about who I was allowed to be. I started taking risks I never would have considered before. Wearing bolder colors in public, experimenting with hairstyles that highlighted softness I had once feared to show, and even adjusting my body language to match the identity I had long kept hidden. But growth is rarely linear, and I quickly discovered that confidence doesn't erase fear. It coexists with it. There were moments when I felt exposed, moments when even a passing glance from a stranger made my stomach twist with anxiety. Some nights, I'd lie awake, replaying interactions, questioning if I had been too daring, too visible to me. Those moments were harsh reminders that the world still held expectations I didn't want to meet, and that part of my journey would always involve navigating that tension. One afternoon, I received an unexpected message from someone I had met online, a person who had followed my anonymous posts for months. They wrote about how inspired they were by my courage, how seeing someone explore and embrace their identity had helped them take steps they had been too afraid to take themselves. Reading that message, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, validation not rooted in judgment or comparison, but in shared experience. It was a reminder that vulnerability has a power all its own, a power that can ripple outwards and touch lives in ways we can't predict. That evening, I decided to take a step I had been contemplating for a long time. I would confide in one of my closest friends. My heart pounded as I typed the words, wondering if this person would laugh, judge, or simply walk away. When I finally hit send, I felt a strange mixture of dread and liberation. Their response came within minutes, a simple message saying they appreciated my honesty and wanted to understand. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was real, and for me, that was enough. I began to realize that my journey wasn't just about how I looked or how others perceived me. It was about the courage to claim my truth, even in the face of uncertainty. Every outfit, every experiment, every risk I took in expressing myself became a testament to that courage. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the mirror in my room became less a place of reflection and more a place of affirmation, a reminder that I could exist fully, unapologetically, and still be safe. Around this time, I also started experimenting with makeup. At first, it was subtle, just a bit of foundation to even out my skin tone, a touch of lip balm, maybe a hint of eyeliner. But with each new technique I tried, I felt a small thrill, a sense of artistry and self-expression that went beyond clothing. I learned how shadows and highlights could reshape my features, how color could convey emotion, how even the smallest details mattered in telling the story of who I was. Through all of this, I discovered something profound. The external transformation, while important, was only a reflection of the internal one. The courage, the curiosity, the willingness to explore, to fail, and to try again, these were the real markers of my journey. And as I continued to grow, I realized that being a femboy wasn't just a label or a style choice. It was a declaration that I could exist authentically, on my own terms, without fear. By now, my life had begun to shift in ways I hadn't anticipated. What started as quiet experimentation in my room had slowly begun to shape my identity, my confidence, and even the way I related to others. I noticed that I carried myself differently, not arrogantly, but with a subtle awareness, a steadiness in my posture, a grace in my movements that reflected the identity I was embracing. It was like I had discovered a rhythm that had always been inside me, waiting for permission to move freely. Yet, even as I grew more comfortable, the world outside my private spaces remained a landscape of uncertainty. I sometimes hesitated to speak in certain tones or gestures, fearing judgment. I avoided places where I thought I might be scrutinized. Those moments reminded me that while self-acceptance is powerful, it doesn't erase the external pressures or the voices of expectation we carry with us. Learning to navigate them became a lesson in patience and self-compassion. One day, I decided to take a bigger step. I would attend a small, local meetup of people exploring similar identities. I had been nervous for weeks, worrying about what people would think, how I would fit in, whether I'd be accepted. When I walked in, my heart raced, my palms were sweaty, and I felt an almost overwhelming sense of vulnerability. But then I looked around and saw people smiling, talking freely, wearing styles and expressions that mirrored their inner selves, and I felt a sudden wave of relief. It was transformative. I realized that there was a community, a space where authenticity wasn't just accepted, but celebrated. I spent hours listening to stories, sharing my own experiences, and even learning techniques for styling, makeup, and self-expression that I hadn't dared to try before. For the first time, I felt entirely seen, not by strangers, not by a mirror, but by people who understood the journey in a way that transcended explanation. From that day, my experimentation became bolder. I learned to mix textures and layers in ways I had once thought impossible. I embraced colors that felt daring, hairstyles that emphasized softness and fluidity, and makeup techniques that highlighted features I had never appreciated before. Each choice was deliberate, a step toward expressing the self I had always felt inside but had been too afraid to show. Yet, Even with growing confidence, I discovered that transformation also comes with reflection. There were moments when I looked at photos of myself from the past and felt a mixture of pride and disbelief. Pride in how far I had come, and disbelief that I had once doubted my own right to exist fully. Those reflections reminded me that self-discovery is not a destination, it's a journey, full of twists, setbacks, and breakthroughs that continue to shape who we are. One quiet evening, sitting in my room after a long day, I looked in the mirror and realized something I hadn't truly acknowledged before. I wasn't trying to become someone else. I was reclaiming myself, piece by piece. Every outfit, every accessory, every small experiment was a statement that I deserved to exist, to be seen, and to be celebrated. And that realization, simple, profound, and deeply personal, was the heartbeat of my journey. As time went on, I noticed the quiet power of consistency. Dressing in ways that felt authentic became more than a hobby. It became part of my identity. It wasn't just about the fabrics, the colors, or the makeup. It was about claiming the freedom to exist as I truly felt inside. Each morning, I approached my mirror with intention, experimenting, adjusting, learning. Some days were flawless. Others were full of mistakes and frustrations. But every attempt taught me something new about myself. Around this stage, I began to understand the emotional depth of transformation. It wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional, and sometimes spiritual. I had to confront insecurities I hadn't faced before, feelings of shame I had carried for years, and the persistent fear of judgment. And yet, the more I faced these fears, the more resilient I became. Each step forward, no matter how small, reinforced the truth I had discovered early on, that I deserved to exist authentically and that my identity was valid. One of the most profound moments came unexpectedly. I was invited to a casual gathering with friends, some of whom knew nothing about my journey. That day, I decided to fully embrace my style, wearing an outfit I had been refining for weeks. My heart raced as I walked in, worried about reactions, but as the evening unfolded, I realized something incredible. My friends responded with curiosity and kindness, not judgment. They asked questions, complimented details, and most importantly, they treated me as the same person I had always been, just more fully myself. That night, I understood a critical lesson. Authenticity isn't just about visibility, it's about courage, vulnerability, and trust. By showing myself, even in small ways, I created space for others to see me without preconceived notions. It was both exhilarating and humbling. I realized that transformation isn't only personal, it ripples outward, influencing relationships, interactions, and even the way others perceive the possibilities of identity. Encouraged, I began experimenting with more daring elements of self-expression. Hairstyles became bolder, accessories more playful, and makeup techniques more intricate. I relished the process of discovery, of learning what worked for my features, my style, and my sense of comfort. Each new combination became a testament to courage, the courage to try, fail, adjust, and try again. But transformation is never without its challenges. There were moments of doubt, days when self-criticism crept in, when I questioned whether I was doing it right or whether I had the courage to continue. Those moments were painful, but they were also necessary. They forced me to confront the parts of myself I had hidden for years, to understand that fear doesn't mean failure, it means growth. By embracing both the joy and the fear, I began to see my journey in its full complexity. I wasn't just becoming someone new. I was reclaiming a version of myself that had always existed, patiently waiting for recognition. Each step, each outfit, each reflection in the mirror reinforced a truth I had long resisted. I am valid, I am capable, and I deserve to exist fully and authentically. By this point, my transformation had moved beyond experimentation and into a deeper, more personal evolution. I began to understand that the journey wasn't just about aesthetics or fashion. It was about the courage to exist fully, to reconcile every part of myself, and to navigate the subtle balance between vulnerability and strength. Each outfit, each hairstyle, Each detail I adjusted was a reflection of the inner work I had been doing for years, the years I had hidden in plain sight, pretending to be someone I wasn't. I also noticed how my internal dialogue had changed. Where there was once hesitation, now there was curiosity. Where there had been fear, now there was patience. I learned to speak to myself with kindness, to celebrate small victories, and to recognize that setbacks weren't failures. They were lessons. There were still days when doubt crept in, but I had begun to see those moments as temporary, fleeting challenges rather than reflections of my worth. One evening, I decided to take an even more significant step. I shared my journey openly with my family, starting with my sister. I had never imagined the anxiety I would feel before that conversation, the fear of judgment or rejection. But as I spoke, I realized something profound. Honesty is powerful. My sister listened quietly, then smiled and said, "I'm proud of you." Those words, simple and unadorned, felt like a balm to years of hidden shame. They didn't erase the fear I had carried, but they affirmed my right to exist authentically. That moment with my sister became a turning point. I began to see that transformation is never solely a private process. It has ripple effects. By embracing my identity openly, I was creating space for others to see me without pretense, to interact with the real version of me. It was simultaneously terrifying and liberating because vulnerability comes with risk, but it also comes with authenticity, the kind of authenticity that feels like sunlight spilling into a room long closed off. From there, I grew bolder in the choices I made daily. I experimented with textures, layers, colors, and makeup in ways I had once considered impossible. Each morning became a ritual, an act of affirmation. And as my confidence grew, I discovered another subtle shift. People began responding to me differently, not because of my appearance alone, but because my presence radiated the quiet power of self-acceptance. Even so, the journey was not without its emotional complexities. There were moments of reflection, of sadness, of longing for a world where I didn't have to explain myself. But through every challenge, I returned to the mirror, to the quiet rituals that had shaped my identity. And in that reflection, I saw something I had never seen before, a person who was whole, brave, and unapologetically themselves. By now, the transformation wasn't about hiding or pretending anymore. It was about living. Each day, each outfit, each act of self-expression reinforced a truth I had spent years discovering. Authenticity isn't granted by others. It is claimed, nurtured, and fiercely protected. And once you claim it, there's no turning back. Reaching this point in my journey, I finally began to understand the full meaning of transformation. It wasn't about a single outfit, a single hairstyle, or even a single moment of courage. It was about layers, emotional, mental, and physical, that had been building for years, waiting for me to acknowledge and embrace them. Every small choice I made, every risk I took, every moment of vulnerability contributed to a version of myself that was authentic, resilient, and unapologetically alive. One quiet afternoon, I sat in my room, surrounded by the clothes, accessories, and makeup that had been my companions throughout this journey. I took a deep breath and looked in the mirror, not just at the reflection staring back, but at the person I had become. I saw the courage etched in my posture, the softness in my expression, the confidence in my gaze. And I realized that all the fear, all the hesitation, all the years of hiding had led me here, to a self that I could finally embrace without apology. Sharing my journey with others became a new chapter. I posted photos and reflections online, started connecting with people in ways I never had before, and discovered that the courage I had cultivated for myself could inspire others to find their own. The letters, messages, and comments from people who had been afraid to explore their identity reminded me that authenticity has a ripple effect far beyond what we can imagine. I was no longer just exploring for myself. I was contributing to a world where people could be seen, celebrated, and accepted for who they truly are. And yet, even as I embraced this identity, I remained aware that transformation is ongoing. It's not a destination or a final reveal. It's a continuous act of self-discovery and self-acceptance. Some days are easier than others. Some moments bring doubt, discomfort, or fear. But those moments no longer define me. They are simply part of the journey, part of the narrative of learning to exist fully in my own skin. Looking back, I understand now the real reason I became a femboy. It wasn't just about clothes or style, curiosity or experimentation. It was about freedom. Freedom to explore, to express, to move through the world as the person I had always been, waiting quietly beneath layers of expectation and fear. Becoming a femboy gave me permission to reclaim my identity, to celebrate softness and strength at the same time, and to exist unapologetically in a world that often demands conformity. As I continue this journey, I carry with me a profound sense of self-worth, the courage to face fear, and the joy of expression. Every outfit, every glance in the mirror, every small act of courage is a reminder. Authenticity isn't given, it is claimed. And once you claim it, once you step into it fully, it changes everything. Because the truth I've learned is simple yet powerful. The real reason I became a femboy wasn't just about transformation, it was about finally becoming myself.